Welcome, students. This is a direct continuation of yesterday's class. Yesterday's class I ended with the note that how the dilemmas and the predicaments that occur within the characters of the novel also reflects the unresolvable dilemmas in the colonial system. And what is more striking, for instance, is the alternation that takes place between opposing desires. That there is a discrepancy between Kim's love for freedom and his capitulation or his entry into authority, between the impression that is created by imagery, declaration, and action, and the ideological choice that Kim makes at the end. Once he is freed of the English constraint, we are told in the novel, and I quote, "In all India, that night was no human being so joyful as Kim," as you can see in front of your screen. Yet, this period in Kim's life, so he seems to be happy, right? He seems to be elated because he is free from the English constraint. Yet, this period in Kim's life will see him eventually choose the English order over the native chaos and sacrifice desire for power. The multiplication tables which Kim hated previously, they will be what will redeem Kim at the end of his final test for the service. And the final test, that is in the chapters 9 to 10, will take place under the tutelage or under the tutorship of Lurgan Sahib. There is a character in the novel, and of course of Colonel Creighton. Colonel Creighton, whose knowledge of detail, trickery, and native culture actually makes him the masters of both worlds. And if what Frederick Jameson opines in The Prison House of Language, that the imagery of the eye provides a privileged language for the description of epistemological disorders. Epistemological means, episteme is the study of the origin of knowledge. So if there are disorders in the epistemological scheme, that is in the knowledge, in the entire discourse of the origin of knowledge, then the imagery of the eye, that is the sight that he gifts, that is the sight that is first gifted to the Lama, and then the imagery that Kipling uses during the chapters of tutorship in his novel, this imagery is actually a privileged language. The one who has the power of sight has the privilege to see the epistemological disorders. And if you can see the disorders, then of course you are in a privileged position to manipulate the knowledge produced thereof. Manipulate according to your own benefit. That is actually the entire schema of things, the manipulation of epistemological knowledge. The telocentric Western philosophy, as we were speaking about, discussing yesterday. So if Frederick Jameson is correct, then it is both appropriate and ironic at the same time that the final testing of Kim should be a test of his control over precisely the sense of sight. That is, the test that Lurgan Sahib takes of Kim. So yes, the test that that Lurgan Sahib would be taking of Kim, and this is the portion where we see the conversation taking place. Kim's and Kim finds himself at first beginning to submit to the illusion, as you can see in front of you, beginning to submit to the illusion. Kim's and the narrator's Orientalism Kim is no longer the narrator over here, as we had discussed in the last class also. Kim and the narrator's Orientalism. It is the Orientalism that divides Hindi from English, magic from mathematics, and subsequently creates binary oppositions between dangerous, dark, shark-filled world of India that threatens to swallow Kim and the white, cold, controlled world of the Sahib that saves. The entire novel is actually, in a way, a series of attempts to play one system of values, to pit one system of values against another, and to see which one wins. What would happen? What would happen if you denied the world of practical reason, action, the eye, and the multiplication tables? You would have a Lama who refuses to look, the quotation which we had analyzed in the last class. What would happen if you denied the dark, chaotic, delightful, magical world of India? You would have the world of a cold, white sahibs whose eyes policed natives and denied them the world that Kim was privileged to see when away from their control, before entering the gates of learning. And like so many other scenes, this episode of Kim's training dramatizes the entire colonial situation. The demonstration of power through knowledge and the eventual triumph of the victory of the colonizer over his deepest anxiety. Remember the anxiety that we were speaking of in the previous classes, the anxiety of losing the self in India. So this so many other along with so many other episodes, this particular training episode is also reflective of the entire paradigm of the colonial situation. That is the demonstration of power through knowledge and the eventual triumph of the colonizer over his deepest anxiety, that is losing the self in India. And beneath the surface drama of this scene lies a layer of fantasy, at least one of which disturbs or hinders and questions the apparent victory of the colonizer, of the so-called rational mind. Because the master colonialist, Lurgan, is himself a composite, is himself a mixture, a hybridized nature of unacknowledged contradictions, like so many other characters in the novel. He coldly calculates on one level, but on another, he is vulnerable, he is very weak to the hysteria or to the hysteric surprise of his very young Hindu assistant, with whom he reenacts a kind of homoerotic drama. He appears at first to undermine his own function in the text, but when we are reading it through the lens of theory of the colonial discourse, which is most prominently articulated by Edward Said and Homi K. Bhabha, major tenets of whose theories I have already explained to you in previous classes. So Lurgan, even though even when we read, even though Lurgan appears to undermine his own function in the text, as we read the text through the theoretical lens of the colonial discourse analysis, we see that he produces an ambivalent strategy. Lurgan produces an ambivalent strategy that creates a separate space, which is both a site of learning and discovery, a site of dreams, of fear, and of desire. Again, Lurgan becomes the embodiment of so many oppositional figures, oppositional metaphors, symbols, ideas, the contradictions, the predicaments, the dilemmas that exist within the novel, within the mind of Kipling, within the mind of Kipling's characters, within the mind of the omniscient narrator within the novel, and within the entire colonial discourse for the matter. And as we find that Lurgan's workshop is a very curious combination of a toy shop, a jewelry shop, a magic shop, a schoolroom, and a family home. So too, the triumph of Kim's education. When Kim will be educated, he will be qualified to survey, to measure and spy for the English, but will also lead him to split the chosen father. he loves into educator and child, to turn Lurgan into an unconscious object of the Orientalist discourse, where the Lama can be placed into oppositional positions and ultimately betrayed. So the Lama has to be placed in the oppositional position in order for the discourse to take place, in order for the colonial discourse to, flourish. Oppositional to Lurgan, oppositional to Colonel Creighton, and so many other substitute fathers that Kim chooses along his journey, in his journey towards becoming fully educated, towards becoming fully, English. But the opposition is necessary in order to reflect the predicament that Kim was facing, the ambivalence that Kim was facing. And eventually the opposition was also necessary to reflect that it is the Lama who has to be betrayed, the spiritual Lama who refuses to look, outward, but always is spiritually looking inward, tries to remove the faults of his own rather than to, to civilize a world of a group of savage Indians. That is the colonial agenda. So the opposition is necessary in order to pit them against each other, so that Kim can, of course, choose one and betray the other. And with that, we finally reach the last part of the novel, which is nothing but the chapters 11 to 15. And in this part, Kim's double journey, for which we have been prepared from the start, double journey towards finding of his self and the choice, finding of the father. This journey carries forward the plot of the Great Game and brings to an ending the plot of the Lama's search for the River of the Arrow. But the ending also returns us to the problem of Kim's origins and identity. The questions with which we began studying of this novel, Kim's identity. And in a very, ironically speaking, in a very Shakespearean sort of a way, uh, of course, we do not know whether either Shakespeare or Kipling meant it to be in this way. However, much like Shakespeare's many plays and dramas, Merchant of Venice, Hamlet, Macbeth, these plays, they have a certain, in how should I put it? There were certain mysterious ways of of connecting the subplots together. The Merchant of Venice begins with the introduction of the character of Antonio in a melancholic mood. And forward a few scenes, we also have Portia, whose introduction also begins in the similar way. Now, this similarity suggests the fate of these two characters, which are leading towards a similar destination. So, remember our previous classes, how I had began the analysis of Kim's character by asking the question, who is Kim? Who is Kim? Who is Kim? This is the slide that I am referring to. I had began discussing or analyzing the quests of the character of Kim, and it began with the question, who is Kim? Who is Kim? Who is Kim? And here we have the last part of the novel, Kim self-asserting, I am Kim, I am Kim, and then asking again, what is Kim? So he has been duly objectified. From who to what? Who is Kim to what is Kim? Who is Kim? Who is Kim to I am Kim, I am Kim? These two statements, they are a vicious circle of identity formation. Okay, you can ask a number of questions from these two statements and yet have multiple answers for all of those questions. How his identity has undergone several layers of changes, and where does he stand now? Is he a subject? Is he an object? Is he both? Has he been successfully otherized? Has he become the self? Where does his ambivalence stand? Which side does it split, incline towards, etc., etc.? So the ending also returns us to the problem of Kim's origins and identity. Kim is born again after his illness that he has within the novel, but he is reborn to a cry that returns from the past. I am Kim, and what is Kim? He returns to life, quote unquote, powerless upon the breast of a sahiba, of a female westerner who breathes life into him. Kim's fall into the law of the father, into the symbolic order of colonial civilization, circles around the problem of unconscious desire. And he and this circling and this confusion appropriate occurs because this symbolic order of the father, this law of the father, it appropriates desire, that is the desire for territories, the desire for conquer, desire for identity. It appropriates, or it makes this desire, in, introduces this desire into the field of power. And Kim's final surrender into the law of the father, into the symbolic order of power, is also aided by refusing this circle and this confusion. It is also enhanced when Kim refuses to admit to his Lama that he is a Sahib and not merely a Chela. He refuses his new identity. He at once understands that he has been Englishized, that he has been turned into the law of the father, that he is one of the symbolic order right now. He is also circling around his identity formation as he refuses to admit to the Lama that he is no longer his Chela, but he has become a Sahib. And And so he asks, why plague me with this talk, Holy One? It vexes me. I am not a Sahib, I am thy Chela. And finally, even though finally, finally we have Kipling giving the Lama the last word in the story. And the completion of Kim's education is marked by his preparation. Very ironically, it is marked. See how his completion of education, how his education is completed, because it is marked by his preparation of a report. Remember the reports that we were talking about in our previous classes, how the English, survey companies used to make reports of the cities, how Kipling himself used to write about Lahore and night time. So is Kim's education completed with the preparation of a report with a map, which is wild, walled, mysterious city, where the wells are 400 feet deep and lined throughout with camel bone. The geography of the landscape to be mastered, the territory which is to be mastered, it recalls other hidden and mysterious cities in Kipling's early short stories, as you can see on your screen. And these short stories, they trapped or threatened English protagonists. And the difference is that here there is a less fear of the unknown, because it is now only a space to be colonized and mapped into knowledge. It is no longer unknown because Kim already belongs to this soil. What he needs to do right now, after completion of his education, after he has entered the gates of learning and come out as an Englishman, there is no longer new knowledges that he needs to gather, because he was already there in the streets of India. But what he needs to do is that he needs to map this knowledge. He needs to structure this knowledge so that it matches the structure of the colonizing agenda. For his graduation, upon completing this report, he is rewarded with two symbolic gifts, a costume and a gun. And it is Mahbub Ali, the spy, who presents him with the dress of honor. A gold embroidered Pathan garment and a mother of pearl nickel plated revolver, .450 revolver, that completes the splendor. Once again, we are reminded of the opening scene and the announced opposition between the museum and the gun, the Zamzama, with its implications of control and knowledge over the native. So Kim, who was rising up, was trying to ride the Zamzama, who was trying to control the Zamzama, now has the gun in his hand. And pathetically, it is an Indian who gives it to Kim, the ambivalent, the split Indian, who is a servant of the company. And Kipling makes this Mahbub Ali gift the symbol of power, hand over the crown jewel of that was the Zamzama in the first scene, symbolically the it is like the shaft that wields control over that entire land, like the magician's shaft it is. And Kim has finally acquired that. And here again, native India can be contained or tricked by an English boy in Pathan disguise, so long as he has the gun. That is the politics, that is the strategy of Kipling's narrative that we were talking about in the last class. And during the final and crucial journey to the north, Kim is accompanied again by split fathers who represent past desire and future order. Past desire of the Lama, future order of Hari Babu. They are antithetical figures, clustered around, they're clustered around polarities, which has already been established in the novel by the English father with his emblem, the English opium addicted father with his emblem of the red bull on a green field, and an Eastern father with his spiritual search. The political and the spiritual father fit exactly the expectations of the symbolic and the imaginary. The political and the spiritual father, as I said, they fit the antithetical description expectations of the symbolic and the imaginary. The Lama, as the imaginary parent, belongs to an earlier stage of development that precedes or comes before, you know, that comes before the consciousness of political categories and social power. As Kim becomes more and more conscious of these aspects, the Lama, the spiritual father or the imaginary parent, comes before this. The relationships with symbolic fathers, however, are determined, as Laka would have put it, by a social organization, which is abstract, which is intangible, which can be known only through symbolic terms such as the game, which is great, the great game, the flag, the red bull, the green field. These are the symbolic fathers. It also involves a mode of human interaction, of course, that is determined by isolation and uniformity. Thus, and in such, in such situations, individuals act only to intensify their helplessness, which causes the most fear in themselves, against themselves. Thus Kim, though he is most afraid of being alone and isolated from his life in the native bazaars, commits actions that progressively alienate him, separate him from the group of natives with whom he has enjoyed hitherto an easy camaraderie, a protective sense between among when while being among his native friends. And the last three chapters, they combine not only the search and the game, search with a capital S, G with a game with a capital G. It not only combines the search with the game is the eventual search, as you can see, but the imaginary and the symbolic, the Indian dream and the English reality. This is also a part of the oppositional strategy of the text, in which colonial order appropriates or describes or defines the native desire. This combination is prepared for, we are already prepared for this combination in the opening of the chapter 13, when we see who goes to the hills goes to his mother. This is a very clear-cut a symbolic statement. The basic configuration of landscape involves an ascent into the hills, followed by a descent into the plains and into the river. The hills, overdetermined, remember overdetermination, the term overdetermination, the hills, overdetermined as feminine and spiritual, home, and as masculine, political testing around, seem at first to provide a way out of the world of work into an idealized space where the Lama and Kim can mediate on the problems of entrapment in the wheel of life. So the hills, they are overdetermined. They are both. It is both. They are both feminine, the spiritual home, and they are the masculine, which is to become the political testing ground. And at first, the hills, they provide a way out of the world of work and chaos into an idealized space where the Lama and Kim can meditate. Hmm. Kim's love for the Lama and his declared devotion to his cause seems unconsciously to denounce the ideology that negates the Lama's value. So Kim's love for the Lama, it first denounces the ideology that he should negate or he should stand opposed to the values that the Lama represent. The spiritual Lama as opposed to the telocentric colonizer, the kin of the colonizer, that is Kim. So the love that he has for the Lama, it actually makes Kim denounce this ideology where he needs to, according to which he needs to negate the Lama's values. But on the other hand, the hills are a place of business for Kim, the workplace of spies from both the British and Russian secret services who aim to turn the garden into a map, to structure, to colonize, and to contain the Indian within European structures. Yet, although the two meanings of the hills appear to contradict each other, in effect, the first tends to idealize and legitimize the other. The spiritual geography of the hills lends its temptation to the political geography of imperialist intent. It is because the hills are presented to us as a spiritual, symbolic entity representing the motherly, the feminine. It is because of this it becomes a temptation. It becomes lustrous for all of that geographic and imperialist intent. And the fact that Kim oscillates between the sahibs and the Lama, the school and the road, is a movement between the need for mechanical anonymity and competition and the opposing need for dependence and bonds of kinship, which is actually something that all of us feel, this kind of contradiction. The life of a sahib in school or out of it is inevitably a life of cold competition whose final reward will be Kim's function as a cog in the machinery of the imperial machinery. His life on the road with the Lama, on the other hand, on the contrary, is a carnival. It is a fair that inverts and it kind of makes a democracy of the imperial hierarchy of class, creed, color, and race. It is carnivalesque in nature. By begging for the Lama and serving as his eyes, Kim supports him, fathers him, and becomes his guide. So intensely does Kim need that sense of bonding, dependence, that he's willing to lie for its privilege. Thus, he tells the Lama that he is a scribe and that he is, within quotes, all free, which of course we know he is not. He is as clearly bound to that hierarchy as the Lama is to his wheel, the wheel that he searches, the wheel that he wants to get free from. And Kim is antithetical and oppositional and also similar to the serialized, to the vicious cycle of hierarchy that Kim is trapped into. And finally, Kim pretends he has returned in order to pursue their original search, when in fact he has returned to use the Lama as a cover for his mission to the northern hills. The Lama's subsequent words to Kim prepare us for the boundary confusion between the spiritual search and the English game, as he says, "Thou wast sent for an aid. That aid removed, my search came to naught. Therefore we go out again together and our search is sure." Their searches are, of course, contrary. The Lama used to aloneness, to loneliness, to autonomy, wishes freedom from his remaining, from the fraction of his remaining attachment to the world. He wants to be free from the wheel of life. The whereas Kim's search is for the opposite. What he wants is ever more binding attachments to this world, to the fathers, the sahibs, the secret services. Even his deception of the Lama, even that the fact that he lies to the Lama, seems forgivable because of his repeated declarations of love. Kim, who has loved him without reason, now loved him for 50 good reasons. So the love that was hitherto, completely devoid of any conditions, now becomes a rational love. He has 50 reasons to love the Lama. So because he has been rationalized, the rationale or reason being something that has been apparently gifted to us by the advent of enlightenment in the European tradition, and it is as if before that we were, not as if, according to the British, we were unreasonable savages before that. So of course now Kim has become a rational lover. And love, of course, like the last class we discussed, love then serves both as an oppositional discourse, which opens a possibility of an alternate method of negotiation with the other. And it also has an excuse to transcend all personal betrayals, the universalized love. And because Kim's character is such that he's unaware of his oscillations between dependency and autonomy. His meditations on his actions frequently seem forced and arbitrary. Neither he nor his creator, perhaps, appears entirely in control of the motivations which seem to be energized by a variety of impulses. Such changes in voice, there are changes in voice in the subjective narrator, such changes in voice create a characteristic indecisiveness. So now it is the omniscient narrator speaking, now it is Kim, now it is Lama, etc., etc. So the Kim's characteristic moments of introspection, for instance, they are curiously depersonalized. They are curiously depersonalized by shifts in voice and perspective, as you can see in front of your screen. And as with his other freely associated meditations, this sequence of thoughts runs not in English but in Hindustani. Yet he leaps and shifts. Yet the leaps and shifts are characteristics of his deflective narrative strategy. Even though this is a fragmented thought, we can presume it is sequential in logic and self-contradictory. After Kim lists his adventures and his function in the game, and after the lengthy list of fathers to whom he owes his joy, the reader is hard put to believe Kim's subsequent declaration of aloneness. We do not believe that. Kipling never allows Kim to be alone actually. Yet the cry reproduces the opposition, submerged, lying at the beginning, that the narrative of Kim's quest intends to, but never does resolve. As was with the colonialism, which was an attempt which intended to economize the territory. The word intent and the word attempt, these very words, they they demonstrate the failure of the agenda, the failure of the system, which it eventually was. And so will Kim's opposition also will be. Kim intends to resolve them, but actually he will never be able to. Such is the colonial ambivalence. And the journey to the journey to the hills, like the rest of the book, it also operates on twin symbolic levels. It is both the fantasy of regression, of losing, and also fantasy of realizing the ideology of colonialism. Whereas on first level, the Lama is triumphant as lone discoverer Whereas on one level, on the first level, the Lama is triumphant and as lone discoverer of his river of Arrow, of his river within, that is, and as a lover of the Chela for whom he renounces freedom from the wheel of life. And on the second level, the Lama is a museum piece. He is non-violent, non-active, and absurd in the world of guns, Russian spies, and violence. If on a private and imaginary level, the Lama gains strength, youth, and prestige, on the symbolic and social level, he is finally advised to recognize his own helplessness in a world where only the strong survive. Darwinism, the survival of the fittest, and is advised to recognize his own helplessness and further to accept his need for the likes of sahibs like Kim to ensure his continued saintliness. But on both levels, the ending transfigures the events that lead up to the conclusion. And the descent from the hills into Shamleg, it takes Kim into a further stage of his fantasy as he acquires his omnipotence. We are met with the character of Lisbeth, the character whose story is told by Kipling in Plain Tales from the Hills. And in the previous story, Lisbeth is seduced and abandoned by her English lover, whom she has nursed to life. She will consider Kim favorably because Kim will not consider her to be a sexually submissive oriental woman. Okay, and Kim will, and the woman of Shamleg and the woman from Kulu, and they help to conclude the series of women that appear very marginally within the text. It is through the sexuality of Lisbeth that she has been allowed power in the past. Kim will deny her that power, yet will accept her friendship. Sexually exploited and abandoned, Lisbeth suggests the larger betrayal of Indians by their English colonizers. Kim will refuse her sexual invitation, not only to show his moral superiority over all the callous sahibs, but also prove that he has passed a crucial test of colonial manhood, the denial of sexuality. Though country born, he will not become a Jalaluddin Mackintosh or a Kimball O'Hara like his father, who were prey to native women's sex and drugs. Rather, he will transcend such weakness and in doing so become a type of super colonialist. For whom sexuality or genderizing or women or drugs, they are not the objective, but only mapping and structuring and creating information, remaking knowledge for the British colonizers. Yes, as I was saying, that rather he will transcend such weaknesses and in doing so become a type of a super colonizer, simultaneously among the people and yet above them. The woman from Kulu, the widow, beyond sexuality, is the mother who gives Kim and the Lama relief in the form of food and shelter when they most need it. Her division of women into two types echoes Kipling's own fears in other Indian stories. As she says, that I have been something of this world, as you can see in this on the screen. There are in fact no women in this book actually who take strength out of a man. Even the courtesan we met earlier in the train is a kindly nun who gives charity to the Lama. And the woman in the brothel who help disguise Kim all treat him as a son. Just as there are no sexual women in the book, there are also no nationalists or natives who would prefer to be freed from the imperialist control. Kipling's Kim is actually an idealized, it is not an idealized India, but Kipling's Kim, the novel, is actually a representation of how the colonizer would want the colonized land to be, where there are no sexualities to tempt the colonizer from the imperialist project, away from the imperialist project, where there are no radical nationalists who would vehemently fight against the principles of the imperialism which Kim represents, which all of the other sahibs represents, which the entire journey of the book represents. So there are no challenges to the colonial stream of thought, which is actually very much false, ahistorical, and fictionalized. The desexualizing and disembodying effect in Kim's attitudes towards his own sexuality is a sort of colonization of the self, the territorialization of the body, colonization of the self and one's own desire, the colonized mind, that is. And the rigid definition and circumscribing of the roles of women as supporters or destroyers of men colonizes, controls, and marginalizes their function in the larger culture. Kim, the novel, is about a child's discovery and recovery of identity and agency built upon a series of losses within an India he is about to lose. A child whose primary identification is with a Lama, whose parentage he must also lose if he is to enter the colonial order. By alienating him from his first Indian objects of desires, Kim search for the Red Bull on a green field dooms him to endless disappointment, loneliness, and alienation. His collaboration with the Lama's search, however, blurs and transfigures the limits of Kim's search for origins, his identity, and his end. The companionship with Lama is a kind of a uh, consolation. It is a kind of a consolation that Kim receives, and he receives nothing other and nothing greater than that. Although Kim has been transformed from a youthful, reckless, happy adventurer into a cog in the imperialist wheel, the ending blesses and makes a sacrament of this change by investing it with the displaced glow of the Lama's transformation. So the fact that Lama has actually found his inner knowledge but refuses to let go of the worldly pleasures of companionship such that he has with Kim. This glow of spirituality is transferred on to Kim, who realizes that his situation, that his position in this dilemmatic situation is what he accepts. It over glorifies the colonial ambivalence. But the final problem or the final predicament that exists in the novel is the fact that the final words of the novel Kipling invests not from Kim but from the Lama. And it is this final evasion that poses as the greatest problems for the reader. Part of the concluding irony is that the powers earlier allotted to the Lama, the power of contemplation, meditation, vision, repose, and non action, are subverted at the end of the novel by the plot, by the ideology, and by the Lama's final act. By choosing freely to return from nirvana for the sake of Kim, the Lama commits an action which is at once human, loving, sacrificial, and also supportive of the official ideology. By choosing love for the Sahib Kim over the freedom from the wheel of life, the Lama is appropriated, is defined, and typed into the values of action associated with warriors such as Mahbub Ali, Indians who have turned their backs on the nationalist project and support the imperial project. Again, a kind of a world that a colonizer would want to see. And but of course, the Lama also commits an act of self-sacrifice characteristic of the Bodhisattva, of the Bodhisattva tradition, the holy figure who postpones his own entry into nirvana to help others find the way. So here, Kipling combines two previously antithetical ideologies of the Christian, the Western, and the Buddhist. He valorizes the world of action, will, and choice over the renunciation and austerity that dominated traditional Hindu thought. As as the novel ends into an air of visionary and meditative thought and prayer and illusion, this end is also a beginning or rather a colonial fantasy that suggests an impossible origin for a new colonialist, one with a split sense of constitution of self, who disavows difference from the native, yet knows otherwise. Kim as the in between of the subject and the object, he refuses to accept his difference from the natives, yet knows in his heart that he is different from the natives. With this knowledge, the book ends. With this formation of knowledge, the book ends. I will be sending you some supporting materials today along with this class. And from the next class, we will continue with alternate perspectives of the novel. Thank you very much.